Man, this thing is awesome,
I say, looking around at the yacht's living room. I'm sure it's not called a living room on a boat, but I don't know what it is called. It doesn't matter. What matters is my 3 buddies around, the brewski in my hand, and a party in the Bahamas awaiting us.
This is dope,
Charlie says, raising his glass of champagne toward Cameron.
Thank you so much for this. A guy couldn't ask for better friends, or a better bachelor party. Really, it's my pleasure,
Cameron says with his $1,000 smile. The 2 of them clink glasses, then Trent and I clink our bottles. Then we all holler excitedly and slam down the rest of our drinks. Trent and I, the 2 working-class stiffs, are drinking beer. Meanwhile, Charlie and Cameron are drinking expensive champagne. Cameron has always been wealthy. He was born into it, but Charlie hasn't. He's about to marry into wealth. When I gave him shit for drinking champagne as the yacht left the harbor, he said,
I gotta get used to tasting the good life.
That all had us cracking up. It's a running joke, him marrying Eliza for her money. But it's only a joke because we know he loves her. They are a great match. And unlike many of his previous girlfriends, the rest of us actually approve of her. As Cameron pours a couple more glasses of champagne and Trent grabs us a couple more beers, a warm breeze swirls in through the open doors behind me. There's an outdoor seating area just outside the living room, just beyond a set of sliding glass doors. I step out onto the aft side of the boat. I think it's aft anyway, and squint to see the Florida coast receding on the horizon, hunkered under the setting sun. When we get to the Bahamas in a few hours, we'll probably be partying late into the night and sleeping all day tomorrow before our return trip tomorrow evening. Trent steps out and hands me a beer.
Dude, you know what I just realized?
He asks.
What? We're going into the Bermuda Triangle.
What?
I shout.
Are you serious? The Bahamas are in the Bermuda Triangle?
What's wrong?
Charlie says, stepping out with his glass of champagne. He's always the peacemaker, and it's something I exploit when the mood strikes me.
I can't believe you would do this to me,
I say, pointing at my friend's face.
Do what?
Charlie asks, clearly scared.
I didn't do anything.
Next to me, Trent is trying to keep a straight face.
Yeah, that's fucked up, dude,
he says.
What?
Charlie says.
What are you talking about?
You're taking me into the Bermuda Triangle,
I say, trying to keep the ruse up, but I'm unable to hold it in any longer. Trent and I cackle. Charlie looks mad for a moment, but he can't sustain it. He cracks a smile and gives me a shove.
Damn, how do I always fall for your shit?
He says.
I'm serious. You should take up acting.
No, I shouldn't. You're the only person in the world I can fool. I bet Eliza won't have a hard time faking her orgasms with you.
We all crack up again. This is all par for the course with us.
Whoa, that's cold,
Cameron says, stepping out and joining us.
Enough about Charlie's fiance's orgasms. Let's start the real party.
He extends a hand, showing us a plastic baggie with small and colorful squares of paper inside. Acid.
Oh shit,
Trent says.
We're really doing this?
Hell yeah we are,
Cameron says.
Let's get weird.
The stars shift and swirl, mirroring the movement of the dark waves on which the yacht floats. The hum of the engines and the sound of water parting under the boat coalesce into a strangely lulling symphony that fills my ears, making my brain feel like it's covered in fuzz. I lay on one of the seats on the aft of the boat, staring up at the brilliant splash of stars overhead. Trent lays on another seat nearby. We haven't said a word in I don't know how long. Time is no longer measurable for me, not in this state. All I remember is asking if Trent felt anything, and he replied by giggling for what seemed like a year, but was really probably 5 minutes, or a month. That was a yes. Inside, Charlie and Cameron are playing Mario Kart on the N64 that Cameron brought along. They sound like they're having fun. The 2 members of the crew haven't been back to check on us, for which I'm thankful. I don't think I can handle interacting with a stranger right now.
Do you know how many ships and planes have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle?
Trent asks. The sudden introduction of his voice makes me shiver. At first, I'm not sure if he's talking to me, which is good because I don't want to think about people going missing. Not right now. Not while LSD is messing with my brain. I want to keep things light and happy, so I don't answer. But it doesn't matter. Trent keeps on going.
Over 2,000 ships and 200 planes,
He says, voice full of awe.
I wonder what happened to them all.
They sank.
I say.
Simple as that. Got lost and sank.
I don't know.
Trent says.
What if there's another explanation? I heard a theory that there's a wormhole out there, like a local disturbance that opens up when the conditions are just right, and it transports people to another dimension.
My head swims as I continue looking up at the stars. They're still moving, swirling, leaving tracers in their wake. Part of me knows it's just the movement of the yacht and the drugs that are making the stars look like they're moving. But in this state, seeing is believing. And what I'm seeing is trippy as hell.
Sorry,
Trent says after a long moment.
didn't mean to bring the mood down.
It's okay.
I say. But I close my eyes for a moment, trying to get my mind away from the thoughts of people disappearing. It would be so easy if something went wrong. So easy for this tiny little boat to disappear into the dark depths below. I don't believe in alternate dimensions or wormholes in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't believe in any of the weird stuff people say about the Bermuda Triangle. I believe in...
Wow,
Trent says, interrupting my train of thought. I open my eyes and sit up to look at him, and I see strange, tiny specks of colored light floating up from the floor. They shimmer, changing colors from blue to green to purple to orange. I look down at the floor of the yacht, seeing the specks appear as if they're coming from the floor, or through it.
Are you guys seeing this?
Cameron asks, stepping through the open sliding door, his hands out as if to play with the specks. But they seem to disappear into him as they touch his skin, like tiny snowflakes melting as they touch him. If snowflakes were multicolored and floated up instead of down.
Yeah, I see it,
Trent says.
Me too.
I say. Charlie steps outside behind Cameron, a look of amazement on his face.
It looks like it's just coming around the boat.
He moves to the side and looks over. With my heart racing, I stand up and do the same. He's right. It's as if the colored specks are only around the boat, creating a perimeter about 3 feet thick beyond the side. The specks come up out of the water and float upward into the night sky. Looking up, I find that they continue up as far as I can see, like a boat-shaped tunnel into the stars. Part of me wants to believe this is a shared hallucination brought on by the acid, but I know the chances of that are slim. All 4 of us seeing the exact same thing? Not likely.
Is this like, what's it called? Bioluminescence?
Trent asks. I stick my hand out and watch the specks of light disappear into my skin. They don't come out the other side, which is strange because I can see them moving through other things, like the awning, the table, even the cabin.
Someone should ask the captain if he's seeing this,
Charlie says. That makes me remember the 2 crew members, the captain and the chef. We can't see either of them from where we are. The captain is driving the boat, and the chef is down in the kitchen, preparing dinner that's supposed to be served at 8, whenever that is. I pull out my phone, only to find that it's completely off, and I can't get it to turn back on.
Are your phones working?
I ask. As my 3 friends pull their phones out, I gaze into the living room area. On the left side of the room, there's a narrow door that leads down to the kitchen. The door opens and the chef, a stern-looking man with Eastern European features, steps out. His eyes move over us as though we're not even here. He turns and heads towards the helm. As he goes, I see that he has a knife in his hand. Gulping, I try not to dwell on the horrible feeling digging into my gut. It's just the drugs, I tell myself. You're tripping on acid. That's all it is. Everything's fine.
Strange. My phone isn't working,
Cameron says.
Me neither,
Trent says. Charlie shakes his head.
Nope.
The motor dies down as the yacht suddenly slows. We all have to shift our feet to keep from falling down. Once we're secure in our stances, we all look toward the helm. The boat bobs on the waves as it comes to a complete stop.
Guys, I say, I think something's wrong. The chef came up with a knife.
Cameron laughs.
Dude, you're tripping. Maybe they're trying to figure out what this weird shit is. I'll go talk to them.
No, Cameron, I say.
Wait, I don't like this. Something bad is happening. Just stop,
Cameron snaps.
You're going to make us all have a bad trip if you keep this shit up. It's fine. I'll be right back.
He walks through the open doors and heads down the hall toward the helm.
This is nuts,
Charlie says with a laugh, still amazed by the specks of light floating up and up and up. I stare after Cameron, watching him disappear down the hallway. After a moment, I hear him yell, and that yell turns into a ragged scream. All three of us look that way. I can't speak for the others, but I'm having a hard time processing whatever is happening. My hands are clammy and my stomach churns. Charlie is the one who snaps out of it first.
Let's go see what's happening,
he says. Without waiting, he moves inside and toward the hall, but he freezes as the chef steps out. There's blood splashed all over his white clothes, and more of the red liquid drips from the knife he holds in one hand. He doesn't hesitate at all. He simply strides toward Charlie, who turns and runs back outside.
He's gonna kill us!
Charlie screams. This isn't happening, I think. I'm asleep. This is an acid nightmare. Thankfully, some deeper instinct ingrained in my DNA takes over, and I bolt toward the side of the yacht. There's a small walkway skirting the cabin, and I rush down it toward the front of the boat. Trent runs behind me, and I can only hope Charlie is going the other way. As I move down the slide, I glance through a window and into the helm control area, which is really just a small, open-sided area with 2 seats placed in front of the boat's controls. The captain is hunched over in one of the seats, blood still dripping from the gash in his neck. Cameron lies on the floor nearby, both his eyes gouged out and his mouth locked in a silent death scream.
Move!
Trent says, shoving me ahead. I glance behind me and see the chef following us. We get to the front of the boat, seeing Charlie coming down the other side. There's a small seating area at the front, and we look for something to use as a weapon, but everything is bolted down. So as the chef steps out on one side, we all go down the other side, keeping the bulk of the boat between us. Following Charlie's lead, we all run back around the other side and head up to what I heard the captain call the flybridge when we got to the tour. It's an open-air platform that sits on the very top of the boat, with boat controls so you can helm the boat from there or from down in the enclosed area. From up here, we can see the chef coming around the other side. The only way to get up to us is by a set of steep stairs, although he technically could climb up on any side if he wanted to. Charlie picks up the radio and starts shouting into it, asking for help and saying, "Mayday!" repeatedly. Trent sits down and tries to start the boat, although I don't know how that will help since the crazed chef is on the boat with us. That leaves me to fend off the man with the knife. Whirling around, I search for anything I can use, and I see a storage area in the floor. I drop to my knees and open it, immediately seeing an orange flare gun sealed in a Ziploc bag. Getting to my feet, I fumble the flare gun out of the bag, hoping it's loaded with a flare. I try to cock the hammer back, but it won't move. I quickly realize there's a safety button, which I press to pull the hammer back, making the gun ready to fire. The chef is walking calmly up the stairs, like the villain in a slasher movie. I point the gun at him as he reaches the top stair. The tip of the gun is only about 5 feet from his face as I pull the trigger. The chef's head snaps back as the flare sinks into his left eye. The knife clatters to the deck as he drops it and begins screaming. The flare is shooting white-orange sparks out of his eye socket, scorching his skin. He brings his hands up to the area, only to yank them away as the flare burns them. Turning to the side, he launches himself off the flybridge, but he doesn't quite clear the lower railing. He smacks into the side of the boat before splashing into the water.
Oh my God,
I say. I turn toward my 2 friends. Charlie has dropped the radio microphone and is walking toward the top of the stairs. Trent is sitting at the control panel, turned to look at me. The boat still isn't moving. I guess he couldn't figure it out. The strange specks of colorful light are still flowing up, and we still seem to be absorbing them. But their mystery is secondary to what I just did to that man. Charlie crouches down and picks up the knife from the deck. Good idea, I say. He spins around, slashing at me with the blade. I get my right arm up, and the sharp tool slices me bone deep. I stumble away in shock, dropping the empty flare gun.
What are you doing?
Trent screams. Charlie moves toward me, a blank look on his face. The back of my legs hit one of the bench seats on the flybridge, and I sit down unintentionally. Trent lurches up from the seats and grabs Charlie by the shoulders from behind. Charlie reverses the knife and stabs back with it, sinking the blade deep into Trent's upper thigh. Trent lets go of Charlie, stumbles back, and bends down to clutch the wound now soaking his shorts with blood.
What are you?
Trent's words are cut off as Charlie drives the knife down into the back of Trent's neck.
No!
I shout, shoving up from my seat and tackling Charlie from behind. The move sends all three of us into a pile near the top of the flybridge stairs. Charlie and I fight on top of Trent's bleeding body. We struggle for the knife, but I'm bigger than Charlie, and I've always been stronger, if only by a little bit. That bit is enough as I get control of the knife and wrench it away from him. He wastes no time, grabbing me by the neck with both hands and squeezing. That strangely blank look still on his face. I want to ask him why he's doing this, what's wrong with him, but I can't speak. So I plunge the knife into his stomach and drag it across, opening up his abdomen. He still doesn't let go. So I stab him again and again in the abdomen as my frantic need to breathe increases with each passing moment. I stab him in the chest repeatedly until his grip finally falters and he releases me. I pull away from him and gasp, my back up against one of the bench seats.
What the fuck?
I say, whimpering.
Why?
Then I scream at the night sky.
Let me wake up!
Time passes. I have no idea how much, but probably just a minute or two. When I come back to my senses, there's still a slow trickle of blood coming from Charlie's body, spreading on his shirt. As I stand up, I hear movement from down below. It's footsteps. Fear and hope war inside me as I go to the railing and look down in time to see a figure walk stiffly out onto the deck below. Cameron? I say, unable to believe what I'm seeing. Cameron turns and tilts his head to look up at me, but he still doesn't have any eyes, only gory wounds where they once were. The chef emerges from the water at the very back of the boat, pulling himself back onto the yacht. Nearby, Trent stirs, shoving Charlie's body off him and standing up. Next, Charlie stands up. I've gone insane, I think. It's the only explanation. Their wounds aren't fake. This isn't some elaborate prank. There's no way. I felt Charlie's flesh give as I stabbed him again and again. This isn't possible. The captain comes out and stands next to Cameron and the chef. They all look at me for a moment, then they turn their attention skyward. I follow their gazes and look up. The boat moves, giving me the feeling like I'm in an elevator that's going up. When I look down, I see that the whole thing is moving. It's rising out of the water, floating with the speckles of color up toward the stars. Then a blinding bright light erupts from overhead, forcing me to close my eyes. When I open them again, I'm in some kind of massive warehouse. There are balls of ephemeral light here and there, illuminating the space. But as I look around, I see that I'm not alone. We're not alone. The silent corpses on the yacht are still here with me, but there are so many more. They're standing on boats or sitting in planes. There are hundreds of planes and thousands of boats, all floating atop a strange jet-black sea that is the warehouse floor. Many of the boats are ancient looking. They have sails and no motors. Many of the planes look like they came from a World War II museum. Dead faces stare at me through windows and from behind windscreens. Other vehicles are more modern, like the yacht on which I stand, and a small commercial airplane floating nearby.
Hello?
I say, my voice echoing across the massive space. No one answers. They all just stare. Charlie steps toward me, his intestines hanging out of the wound I put in his gut. I don't put up a fight as he takes the knife from my hand.
We're fascinated by death,
Charlie says to me.
We've been studying it for some time.
I shake my head.
What are you talking about? Who's we? The answer to that question is not one your mind is equipped to understand.
You're not Charlie, I say, feeling dumb even as I say it.
No,
Charlie says.
We're not. And we're very sorry about this.
About what? I ask. Charlie jams the knife into my chest. I pull a ragged breath in and stare at his face. My friend's face. But not my friend's face.
We're very close,
He says.
to helping humans transcend death. Take solace in that fact. Your sacrifice isn't for nothing.
I grip my friend's shoulders, unable to pull in a complete breath again. He pulls the knife blade from between my ribs and eases me down to the floor. As I bleed out, I can't help but wonder if he told me the truth. I hope he did. I hope I haven't died horribly for nothing. I feel myself depart as the darkness closes in, but not all of me leaves. Some small part of me is forced to stay behind, forced by these strange beings who are so curious about human mortality. And I find that part of me is no longer in control as my body stands up on its own. Something else now inside of it, driving it like a meat puppet. I'm trapped in my own body, like all the others who stare at me with their blank eyes. I'm trapped, and I can't even scream. We arrived at the island an hour after dark in a low-draft boat. It was a last-minute call, and one I wasn't particularly happy doing, but something was wrong with the lighthouse. This part of the Bahamas was treacherous, given all the coral in the shallow water just waiting to tear up passing boats. In fact, Great Isaac Key was only an island in that it was dry land surrounded by water. It was a growth of coral on which a small patch of trees grew. The unmanned lighthouse and the few crumbling buildings were the only things on the piece of land. You could walk from one end to another in about 10 minutes, and at its widest, it would only take you 5 minutes to cross it. Without the lighthouse, and given the cloudy skies, it was pitch black. I could just make out the faded and chipped white paint of the lighthouse against the dark sky. It was impossible not to think about the ghost stories surrounding the island and the lighthouse. Stories of mysteriously disappeared lighthouse keepers and tragic shipwrecks leaving ghosts to roam the island. Stories that only added to the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. As I killed the boat's engine and guided it toward the rocky shore, Nicholas pointed the spotlight around, focusing on the patch of trees between us and the lighthouse.
I can't see where I'm going.
I said.
Aim it at the shore, please.
He did, allowing me to aim the boat between two outcroppings of the gray coral. At 20 years old, Nicholas wasn't my ideal choice for a helper, but I was doing his mother a favor. He preferred to sit at home and play video games or make TikTok videos, thinking he was going to be some kind of influencer. Meanwhile, his poor mother worked 2 jobs to support him and his younger sister. So when she asked me to help him earn a little money and teach him some skills, I couldn't say no. His mom was a good woman, and we'd been friends for over 3 decades. Although it had been years since I'd been called out to the lighthouse, I knew it was a fairly simple system, which was why it was so strange that the light was completely off. Although simple, the system had several fail-safes in place to prevent this very thing from happening. It ran on solar power, for one, and it had several replacement bulbs already in place. If one of the bulbs went out, the system would sense this and shift the apparatus so that the next bulb in line was in position to work. Automation had long ago made lighthouse keepers obsolete, so people like me would be called in whenever there was a problem. But it was a rarity that the light would be completely out. Usually, there would be a warning that something was wrong before that happened. Nicholas hopped out of the boat as we came to the shoreline. He brought the bow line with him and tied it around a thick piece of jutting coral on shore while I grabbed my tools. I stepped carefully off the boat and onto the sharp coral. I needed to watch my step because tripping and falling would likely draw blood. And the whole island was made of the sharp and now dead coral. The last thing I wanted to deal with was a deep cut out here 20 miles from help.
I heard this place is haunted,
Nicholas said as he shined the spotlight at the trees again. There was a smile in his voice, but I wasn't in the mood.
I heard the Bermuda Triangle is a place where ships and people disappear all the time,
I said.
You've lived your whole life in the Triangle. How many people do you know who have disappeared without an explanation?
None, I guess, he mumbled. I felt a little bad for having ruined his fun. My damn temper.
Well, I've never heard of anyone disappearing.
But the last time I was here, I heard what sounded like a woman sobbing.
Really? Nicholas said, turning toward me. You sure it wasn't your wife? I clenched my jaw.
Keep the light out of my eyes,
I said, raising my free hand to block the bright spotlight.
Right. Sorry.
His tone said he was anything but sorry. I lowered my hand and tried to blink away the spots.
Is the boat secure?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay,
I said, setting my toolbox down and opening it to retrieve a flashlight.
Let's go. Want to go through the trees or around them?
Around them.
Nicholas answered a little too quickly. I chuckled.
Okay, let's do it. Lead the way and keep that light pointed at the ground so you can see where you're stepping.
We started toward the lighthouse, skirting the patch of trees on our left. Most of them were just over 6 feet tall and densely packed. A soft Bahamian breeze stirred their tops, the ever-present smell of salt water intensifying briefly. An unmistakable rustling came from the trees. Both Nicholas and I stopped mid-stride and looked that way, shining our flashlights at the trees. I could see the tops of some of them parting violently as something big moved toward us. I expected someone to barge out of the trees at any moment, but the treetops stopped parting just before whatever it was in there reached the edge of the patch. The powerful spotlight that Nicholas held revealed nothing but dense evergreen tree branches.
Hello?
I called.
Who's there?
There was no answer. My fear turned swiftly to anger. I set my toolbox down and opened it, grabbing a hammer out. With the tool in one hand and my flashlight in the other, I rushed to the edge of the trees and shoved through to the spot where I thought the person had stopped. But there was no one there, just thick trees. I knew it had to have been a person because there were no animals of a size who could part the trees like that. But I saw nothing, no one. I backed out of the trees and looked at Nicholas.
Did they move while I was grabbing my hammer?
I asked.
I don't know,
He said, clearly freaked out.
I didn't hear them move, but the trees moved back to where they were before.
I turned back to the trees.
You want to fuck with us, asshole? I've got a pistol on me. I'd hate to shoot you by accident. Better come out now. If you're stranded here, we'll take you back to town with us. No harm, no foul.
I waited, but there was no answer.
Carry this, would you?
I gave the hammer to Nicholas and then gathered my toolbox, and we resumed our walk to the lighthouse. I glanced over at the trees a couple of times, seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Then we were past the patch of trees and approaching a couple of crumbling brick buildings that had once been accommodations for the lighthouse keepers. Nicholas motioned his light at the buildings, through the glassless windows and into the doorless doorways, revealing nothing but dirty concrete floors and blank walls. We came to the wooden stairs up to the lighthouse entrance. The boards were rotting and large chunks were missing.
Careful,
I told Nicholas.
Test each step before you put your full weight on it.
What do you think that was back there?
He asked.
Are we safe?
We're fine,
I said.
Probably just some animal.
What animal would do that?
Maybe a seal.
A seal?
Nicholas asked.
I've never seen a seal around here.
Well, it happens sometimes. Now let's go.
Nicholas moved up the steps, and I moved after him. He went through the open doorway into the base of the lighthouse. I was about to move in, but I had a strange feeling that I was being watched. I looked over my shoulder, jolting as I saw a man standing in the doorway of one of the crumbling brick buildings. He wore a grimace on his pale face, and his eyes burned with hatred. I blinked, and he was gone. I shone my flashlight at the building, but saw no sign of him.
What's wrong?
Nicholas asked from behind me.
Nothing,
I said, turning back and looking at the young man.
Nothing. Let's go.
The interior of the cast-iron lighthouse was dirty. The floor was coated with paint chips that had fallen off the walls. The metal stairs boomed under our feet as we made our way toward the top of the 150-foot structure. I glanced over my shoulder often as we moved, half expecting to see that grimacing man behind us, even though I knew he wasn't real. He was just a figment of my imagination.
So how's your mom doing?
I asked, no longer able to stand the only noise being our plodding footsteps.
Fine,
Nicholas said. I waited for more, and wasn't surprised when he started talking again.
She's always tired. She works so hard. I really thought I would be a famous YouTuber by now or something, to help her out with some money. But I guess that dream is dead. I gotta face reality sooner or later.
You can still pursue that dream,
I said, taking pity on the kid.
But you should do it while you're working to bring money in right away. Take some of that weight off her back now that you're all grown. Yeah,
He said sadly.
I know. I'll give you as much work as I can, but it won't be steady. You might be better off working at one of the resorts or restaurants. Yeah,
He said again. We ascended the last flight of stairs and came to the top.
What the hell?
Nicholas said, shining the spotlight at the floor. Someone had completely smashed the lighthouse lens and bulbs. The floor was littered with pieces of thick plastic from the lens, along with glass from the bulbs and pieces of metal from the machinery.
Someone did this on purpose,
I said, thinking about the man I thought I'd seen downstairs.
Why?
Nicholas asked. I had no answer. I looked around at the floor and then peered out through the floor-to-ceiling windows. One set of those windows opened inward to allow access to the balcony. There was a waist-high railing all around the outside. Our flashlights reflected off the insides of the windows, making it hard to see out. But I could tell that there was no one out there. Whoever had done this was probably the same person who'd been in the trees. Booming footsteps erupted from below, sounding as if one very large person was coming up the stairs. Nicholas looked to me for guidance. I didn't feel confident, but I kept my face impassive.
It's just someone trying to scare us. Do you really have a pistol?
He whispered as the footsteps grew closer. I shook my head, putting my toolbox down. I held my hand out for the hammer. He slapped it into my hand.
Stay here,
I said, and then I moved down the stairs, shining my flashlight down. The interior of the lighthouse was constructed in such a way that there were floors between each flight, which meant I couldn't see who or what was coming up, not from where I was. The booming, rattling footsteps grew closer as I hustled down 2 flights, thinking that the person was coming up the next flight. Breathing heavily and psyching myself up, I raised the hammer and rushed to the head of the stairs, shining the light down. The staircase was empty, and it suddenly sounded like the footsteps were coming from above. I looked up just as Nicholas screamed for help from the top of the lighthouse. Taking the stairs 3 at a time, I rushed back up, coming to the top to find that the spotlight was lying on the floor. Nicholas was nowhere around, but the set of windows that opened onto the balcony stood ajar. I dashed out onto the balcony and saw Nicholas floating out beyond the side, his feet kicking as he struggled against some unseen force. In a flicker, I saw the grimacing man from downstairs. He had Nicholas by the neck, holding him out over the drop-off.
No!
I shouted, running toward them. The man let go just as I got to the railing. Nicholas's fingers brushed mine as he fell. Then he screamed until the sound was cut off by a crunching thump from far below. I looked around for the man, but he was gone. In a sickening panic, I ran all the way down the stairs and found Nicholas outside. His body was a mess of pulverized meat, shattered bone, and splashed blood. I knew he was dead, and I wanted to take him off the island, but I was scared. I was so scared. I couldn't wrap my mind around what I'd seen, so I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran back to my boat, falling twice and scratching myself up as I went. And then I came here. I came straight here. The cop looks at me with undisguised disgust.
That's your story?
He says.
A ghost killed him. That's what you're going with? It's the truth,
I say with my elbows propped on the cold metal interview table and hands on either side of my head.
I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. So those scratches on your arms, scratches that look suspiciously like fingernail marks, were left there when you fell down on your way back to the boat. That's what you're telling me? Yes, it's the truth. And what about your hammer?
He asks. My brow furrows.
What about it? Where is it?
I think about that for a moment.
I must have left it next to Nicholas's body when I went down to see if he was alive. I think I dropped it there. And that's when you got the blood all over your shirt and pants, right? When you tried to save him?
Yes, that's right. When I realized I couldn't save him, I just lost it. I held him to me, getting his blood all over me.
Uh-huh.
The man studies me with his small eyes. He doesn't say anything. I wait.
Your hammer seems to have gone missing,
He says finally.
Missing? Yeah, missing. Like those 2 lighthouse keepers from back in the 60s. Missing. Gone without a trace.
I don't know what to tell you, officer. I was a bit of a mess, but I'm pretty sure I left the hammer there.
Uh-huh. And its mysterious disappearance wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that the victim has wounds to his head that looked like they were made by a hammer, would it?
What?
I say.
Wounds to his head? You mean from the fall?
Cut the shit, John,
He says.
I know you and the kid weren't on good terms. I know that he had some compromising pictures of you that could ruin your marriage. Pictures of you and his mom together. If that's not motive, I don't know what is. You got rid of his phone, but I guess he didn't think to check the cloud.
Please,
I say.
I'm telling you the truth. I didn't kill him. I didn't. I was going to leave my wife. He tried to blackmail me, but I didn't care. I was going to leave my wife for her. I swear. I told you the truth about what happened. I told you.
The cop stands up, shaking his head.
You're so fucked. You should have cooperated when you had the chance.
He leaves the room, slamming the door behind him. I stare down at the table.
I swear it's the truth.
I murmur.
I swear. Let's just let the Coast Guard handle it,
My sister says as we float next to the ancient-looking ship.
They won't get here for another 30 minutes at least,
Dad says, emerging from inside the cabin of our yacht with a first aid kit in hand. My mom stands nearby, looking around, hugging herself. She doesn't say anything to back my sister up, even though I know she wants to. Looking at my dad, it's easy to see why. There's no talking him out of this. He's got that look in his eye, the same look he got when first deciding to learn about boating. Mom calls it his
second midlife crisis look.
The strange fog that rolled in as we approached is so thick, I can't even see up onto the deck of the larger ship. Of course, the fact that the sun has been down for over an hour doesn't help visibility. Luckily, this part of the Atlantic is calm, the waves small and the wind non-existent, at least for the time being.
Hello?
Dad calls through the fog, which seems to dampen his voice. When he receives no answer, he says,
Well, where the heck did that guy go?
I don't know,
I say, staring up at the deck, still not seeing anything.
Maybe he went to go help whoever's in trouble below decks.
Maybe.
Dad says.
Well, let's go see. You coming with me, Lucas?
My dad's excitement is infectious. I grin and nod. It's the third day of our 2-week vacation. We spent it out on the water, fishing and swimming and enjoying the new boat. We were heading back to Bermuda for the night when my dad got the emergency call on the radio. The signal wasn't good, but the caller managed to give us his approximate location. Using our boat's radio, Dad called the Coast Guard and then radioed the guy back and told him help was on the way. But the guy begged us to come. He said people were trapped below decks and the boat was sinking, but he needed help getting the people out. It didn't take much convincing at all. Dad changed direction and we motored toward the coordinates. When we arrived, the guy, barely a dark figure through the fog, caught the lines we threw up to him and tied them off. We haven't seen him since. Without hesitation, Dad grabs onto the netting hanging off the side of the old-school wooden boat and starts climbing.
Be careful,
Mom says.
Where the heck is the Coast Guard?
Lilith says. I don't have to look to see that she's biting a nail while she speaks. It's easy to tell from her voice. I climb up after Dad with my backpack containing supplies strapped over my shoulders. My feet thud as they hit the deck. I hand Dad a flashlight from my backpack and take one for myself. We shine our lights around the fog-shrouded deck, picking out masts and limp sails and lines, but no people.
Hello?
Dad calls. There's no answer.
This is amazing,
he says, gazing around.
Whoever owns this boat must have put a lot of money into restoring it. Or maybe it's a replica built for some movie. Either way, the attention to detail is incredible.
He pauses for a moment, still gazing around.
It doesn't look like it's sinking at all. I don't know. Maybe there's water in the bilge. It's just not tilting yet. Either way, we better be quick about this. Okay,
I say, still feeling the sense of adventure radiating off my father. I follow him over to a door and down a set of narrow stairs. As we go down, the temperature drops a good 10 degrees.
Man, it's freezing down here,
Dad says.
They must have an air conditioner on board. I guess it's not so authentic.
But even as my dad says these things, we come into a narrow hallway that runs down the middle of the ship and find that the interior doesn't match the exterior. The floor is warped from water damage in places and stained dark in others. The walls are similarly degraded. Dad, moving slower now, calls out again.
Hello?
Still no answer. We come to the first set of cabins. The door on our left is closed, but the one on our right is open. Dad shines his light in and jolts in fright, putting a hand out to stop me from coming closer. Then he lets out a relieved breath.
Jesus, you scared me,
he says into the room.
Why didn't you answer?
The only reply is silence. Goosebumps form all over my body, and not just from the cold. I step closer and look into the cabin. There's a shallow desk just inside the doorway with 2 bunks against the same wall. A man sits at the desk, his back to us. He's dressed in old clothes, like ones that went out of style over 100 years ago.
Hello?
Dad says.
Are you okay?
He steps into the doorway, but I grab his arm.
Let's go, Dad,
I whisper.
Please, something isn't right here. We came here to help these people,
Dad says, but his voice wavers. Still, he pulls away from me and steps into the room, reaching out to tap the man on the shoulder. Just as Dad's finger touches his shoulder, the man's arms shoot backward, crunching as they move the wrong way in his shoulder joints to reach for my dad. His head whips around, vertebrae snapping as his ghastly and rotten face comes into view. His lips are gone, showing brown teeth. His eyelids are gone, showing shriveled and discolored eyes. His nose has been gnawed off, revealing 2 slits instead of nostrils. He croaks and reaches with his backward arms, but my dad jumps away, yelling,
Run!
I bolt back the way we came, rushing up the stairs and back onto the deck, heading straight for the yacht. But as I reach the side of the ship, I look down through the fog and see nothing but dark ocean. The yacht is gone.
Where is it?
I shout as Dad comes up beside me.
Where'd it go?
Judy?
Dad shouts, pointing his flashlight out into the fog, revealing nothing but more fog.
Lilith?
A thunderous crunching sounds from nearby, and I feel violent reverberations through my feet. Whipping my head to the right, I see the deck planks snapping in half in the middle of the ship. The deck slants under me, the front and back of the ship tilting from that broken line like the vessel is somehow being folded in half. I try to keep my footing, but the deck quickly becomes too steep, and I find myself sliding down toward the broken middle of the ship. My father is next to me, also scrambling, sliding, trying to catch hold of something to keep from falling into that black maw. We've both ditched our flashlights, which slide down the tilting deck and disappear into the newly formed gap. Reaching out to my left, I grab hold of one of the vertical railing slats, nearly yanking my arm out in the process. I reach out for my dad, but it's far too late. He turns onto his stomach, reaching back toward me, hands out and terror engulfing his features.
Dad!
I yell, just before he disappears into the dark gap between the teeth-like edges of the broken deck. Maybe he's in the water now and he can swim away, I hope. I have little time to process this, because the ship is still tilting, defying physics. The masts on either side of the ship pierce through the deck as the 2 halves continue to move toward each other. Wood crunches and cracks. Sails tear. Lines snap. I know my only choice is to jump, so I swing myself onto the outside of the railing and take a deep breath before launching myself into the air. The dark sea rushes up to meet me, embracing me like an old friend who doesn't know his own strength and could easily choke the life from me. Fighting against unseen currents, I make it back to the surface and inhale. The two halves of the ship are pressing together in a melody of destruction. Knowing that a sinking ship can pull a person under as it goes down, I turn and swim away. But I don't take 4 strokes before I turn and look back for any sign of my dad. The ship isn't sinking though, not yet. The two halves are still pressing against each other like an invisible giant is shoving them together. The sound of boards cracking and snapping is so loud, seemingly contained in the small space by the dense fog. Finally, when there's nothing left resembling a ship, only a collection of snapped and broken wood like some strange monolith to maritime destruction, the thing begins to sink.
Dad?
I call, treading water.
Dad, where are you?
I fight off panic. He must be around. He must be. Something bumps into the back of my head. Crying out, I spin around and see the yacht. Our yacht, floating in the water directly behind me. I'm sure it wasn't here when I jumped into the water. I'm positive. Although it could have been nearby, obscured by the fog.
Mom?
I call as I swim toward the ladder at the back.
Mom? Lilith?
Silence greets me. But at least I won't drown in the middle of the ocean. At least I can radio for help. In fact, the Coast Guard should be here any minute. I climb out of the water and onto the back of the yacht. There's no sign of my mom or sister. Shoes squelching and water draining from my clothes, I walk into the cabin and look down the stairs that lead to the kitchen and sleeping areas. I open my mouth to call for my mom and sister again, but the words don't come. Probably because a column of vapor comes out as I breathe. It's cold, and this is eerily familiar. Still, I need to see. I can't not go down there. When I get to the bottom of the stairs, I'm in an area that doubles as a living room and dining room. The small kitchen is up to my left. Up ahead are the 2 bedrooms on the small yacht. Both doors are closed. I move to the left-hand door, my parents' room, and knock. The door swings open slowly, revealing my mother. She's sitting on the side of the bed, side-on to me. Her hair hangs down, obscuring her face. She looks limp, like if I touched her, she would fall back onto the bed.
Mom,
I whisper.
yes, dear.
She answers. I can't see her mouth move, and the rest of her body doesn't budge an inch.
Are you okay?
I ask.
Where's your father?
I choke on my words, unable to say them.
It's okay, dear.
Mom says, finally turning to look at me. I exhale another cloud of vapor. She's okay. She looks normal.
Come here.
She says, patting the bed next to her. I move over to her, wanting nothing more than to be comforted by my mother. I sit down on the bed, but before I can say anything, my mom says,
Good boy. Now, where's your sister?
Her mouth twists into a too wide grin, and her head cocks to the side as her eyes bore into me. Something scrapes the ceiling above me. I look up to see my sister clinging to the ceiling directly overhead. Her head rotates, vertebrae snapping as it spins to fix on me with an insane grin. Then she drops from the ceiling, her arms rotating in their sockets and reaching toward me as I scream. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.